D&D number 9, Circle of Life in Jesus' Name, chapter 33. It's August 22nd, Thursday, the Tanner home, Pine Forest, Georgia. Gabe looked around the faces of his family as they chatted and ate his favorite meal, beef stroganoff with salad and homemade rolls and apple pie with ice cream for dessert. He wanted to take it all in. It was his last family dinner as a kid. After this, everything would change. He was leaving in the morning on an Ameritech flight, headed to Los Angeles to become one of Jason's elite, now called a JET agent, or JET for short. It stood for Jason's Elite Tactical Agent. They were actually going out a week earlier than he had to report because his dad had some big-time meetings with the upper echelon of Ameritech. The agency was being revamped. His father was being promoted from running the Southeast Division of Ameritech to running the entire Eastern Division, with 3 different guys taking his place. Gabe smiled at the revamp. The company was growing in quantum jumps, thus having to have more field offices and therefore have more men to take over running those offices. The cool thing was, even the names of certain ranks were changing. His dad told him that Jason said that was because of Gabe's input. Gabe had wanted the agents to receive more honor, more respect, and Jason felt that began with how they were addressed. Whereas right now, every agent was simply addressed as agent and their surname, including Jason and Joey. But now more ranks are being added. Now, Gabe's father was about to be a division chief director and can be addressed as division chief or as senior agent Tanner. Joey will be addressed as Deputy Chief Adams, and Jason will be addressed as Director Lee. Agents that will be in charge of the field offices will be SAC, Senior Agents in Charge, and can be addressed as Senior Agent. So, Agent Chris Coley, Marissa's husband, who will now run the New York office, will be called SAC Coley, or Senior Agent Coley. Gabe actually knew him because he was close friends with the Kenos. He was married to Mrs. Davis's sister, Marissa. Gabe didn't know the agent who would run the newly formed Chicago office, but he knew the guy who would run the Texas office, Agent Hart Akins, who will now be Senior Agent Akins. Most everyone simply called him Hart, and Gabe wondered if he would continue to allow the informality. Both Agents Chris Coley and Hart Akins had been Jeffy's bodyguards in Africa several years ago, and both had been wounded near death in the line of duty. They were dedicated totally to the Kenos and to Director Lee and were best friends with Cam Wallace. Gabe smiled. Hart Akins had been his father's assistant for a while, being groomed for his new position in Texas, and someone else was also being groomed, this one to one day take over the Atlanta office, and it made Gabe very happy. It was his own bodyguard, Andy Dalton. Gabe was really happy for Dalton. He'd gotten a late start in life because of his addiction, but he had put himself together and was making up for lost time. Sighing, Gabe realized his mind had wandered, and he brought himself back to the present moment. He watched Iris hold her fork out to his mother to give her a requested bite of her pasta. His mom licked the sauce off her lips and laughed. His father reached over and used his thumb to gently wipe a bit of sauce off of her cheek, and he put it to his mouth. It was an intimate gesture, and Gabe's cheeks reddened a bit. He loved how in love his parents were. It was the best feeling. He thought over the past few months. Jake and Lena's wedding had been awesome. Then Miss Maddie passed away, and even though he knew she was sad and missed her husband, he was sad and he missed her. They all did. Her presence was sorely missed. Her cooking, too. The funeral had been nice. He'd never seen so many flowers in one place. The Kenos had flown home that Sunday after the wedding and then turned around and flown back here the next Saturday. Miss Maddie requested in her will that Grandmaster Keno would give a prayer at her funeral. As always, it was special, and the congregation attending the service was filled with the Holy Spirit. Miss Maddie gifted a giant sum of money to Gabe's foundation. She had already signed complete ownership of the inn over to Lisa years ago. She willed her recipe book to Lily, who loved to help her cook since she was little, and was now in culinary school. Miss Mattie gave a beautiful quilt she'd made with the ladies in town to Miss Jody, an old book about local Native American tribes to John that he'd always loved, and a scrapbook she'd kept of Jake's accomplishments since he was a baby to Jake. Finally, she'd given Lena the crib her husband had handmade for her own daughter, and then several smaller items to her other grandchildren, Charlie, Matt, and Erilyn, a collection of baseball cards, an antique train set, and an antique doll in a wedding dress. The collection of baseball cards turned out to be quite valuable. At the July 4th celebration in Pine Forest, there was a gigantic deal, which was a gigantic deal. Miss Mattie's absence was enormously felt because everyone had been feasting on her treats for 70 years. People came from all over the state for the Pine Forest Hometown Independence Day activities, and the inn was full. People were happy to hear that there will be another inn soon. The town was definitely growing. This year, the town for Independence Day was more crowded than ever because of Gabe's newfound fame and because the Gabe Tanner three-gun quick shot contest at the Eagle Eye Gun Club had been on the Saturday, 2 days after the 4th. It was a huge success. Gabe gave a demonstration of his own skills and a speech about the Second Amendment. He quoted stats on how many lives guns had saved and on how the right to protect oneself against evil was needed and sanctified. You'd think he was running for office, and some people actually started a Gabe for President meme, which he thought was silly. He had to stand and sign autographs for hundreds of kids. The contest ended up costing him $4,000, and he brought in $28,000. It was amazing how generous people were. His speech and his gun demo were videoed and posted, which brought in more money for his foundation. The very next week was the Gabe Tanner Martial Arts Invitational Tournament. The mayor and school board had given him permission to use the high school, and in return he would donate money to improve the football field and buy a new scoreboard. Gabe and Master Apple and a few of his students, including the Stewart boys and Violet and Rose, performed a demonstration. That and highlights of the tournament were videoed and posted. Again, he'd been asked for hundreds of autographs from kids and adults, and lots of girls who all wanted selfies. It cost him a little more money to pull it off, close to $8,000, but they still netted about $10,000. Gabe made sure the public knew that all of the proceeds were going into their local community. It made Gabe extremely happy to present Mrs. Murphy with the brand new Toyota Corolla. He thought she'd be embarrassed, but she was a practical lady and understood to turn down the gift would not help her children. She also accepted help in the refurbishing of her home, just fixing the broken things and updating her appliances. She was grateful and promised to pay it forward. Gabe still had a few $1,000s left and used it to help several more townspeople whose homes seemed to be run down. He and his father and Agent Dalton and a few men from their church did most of the work themselves. Gabe still turned his truck over to Peyton to use for school, and Mrs. Murphy's old car was repaired and saved for Lucas to use when he got his license, and the Murphys and Tanners had a big dinner for Peyton when he left for college at the end of July. It was a bittersweet time. Now, Gabe would be leaving in the morning, and he was feeling pretty nostalgic about leaving his mom and his sisters. He loved them maybe more than life itself. He glanced up at Heather, who had driven back for this special dinner. She'd brought Nolan again, and last night they'd made the big announcement that they were getting married. Gabe was happy for her, but also sad. Like Peyton had said, life was changing. At least it would be a while before Heather married because they said the engagement would last at least a year and they had no date picked out yet. His sisters were all ecstatic, though, and already making plans. Thinking of his sisters, he was glad that both Rose and Violet had finally fessed up to his mom and dad about their clandestine relationships. He'd been in his father's office when Rose poked her head in, he recalled. It went like this. Dad, got a minute? Yes, Gabe and I are about done. Well, Gabe can stay, 'cause he knows what I'm about to say. Gabe was surprised. I do? Yes, and don't smirk. His father nodded. Okay, have a seat. She sat down slowly. Well, I've been dating someone. His father was silent, just like he'd been when Gabe was telling him about the fight behind the school. And I don't really know how I feel about the guy, except that maybe he's cute and maybe pretty interesting. That's fairly superficial. Yes, sir, I get that. I just don't know what to say about him yet. Do you have feelings for him? I like being with him, I think. His father had merely raised his eyebrows. I mean, I like being around him, she demanded. He's interesting. Are you going to tell me who he is? She nodded and drew a deep breath. It's Mike Moreland. Again, his father had been silent. So, like I expected a bigger reaction, Rose said. Did you now? Yes, and so I'm guessing you already knew. He nodded. Yes, I did. And I have to say, I'd almost given up hope that you were going to tell me. I'm sorry. Rose, is there something I've done that would make you think you can't come to me and tell me anything? No, it's not like that, but I know you share everything about us kids with Mom, and I know she doesn't need any stress, and I didn't want to say anything because I didn't know if I was ever going to see him again. Well, from what I know, you've seen him many times now. Well, I've been seeing him a lot because he's going to leave town now that the shoot is done. He has another account he's working on in Denver. Okay. So, how do you feel about him leaving town? She shrugged. I'm not sure how I feel. I'll let you know. Have you made each other any promises? What do you mean? Like being exclusive. Oh, no, nothing like that. And how does he feel about dating a girl who once held him at gunpoint? Well, he doesn't like that part. And how do you feel about him not liking that part? She shrugged. Well, I'm not sure what you're getting at. Well, guns have been a part of your life. Don't go changing yourself to please someone. He has to like you for who you are and not for who he thinks you should be. Rose sat silently, and finally she nodded. Thanks, Dad. Thank you, sweetheart, for telling me about Mike. I hope you'll keep me and your mom informed. I will. I didn't feel good about sneaking around anyway. Good. Oh, and Rose, just so you know, I like you just the way you are. A strong, no-nonsense, level-headed, beautiful girl who shoots straight both figuratively and literally. She came and kissed him on the cheek. Thank you, Daddy. He smiled. You're welcome. Gabe sighed as he remembered the conversation. He himself, just like Rose, wasn't sure how he felt about Mike Moreland. He'd always thought it was strange that Rose had decided to date him. Regardless, Gabe was glad Rose had finally come clean. The conversation between Violet and their father had not gone quite the same, mostly because she was not the one to come to tell him about her relationship with Agent C.J. Blackman. It was Agent Blackman himself who knocked on their front door early one morning. Gabe had let him in, and he asked to see his dad, but his father was making breakfast for his mom, and he'd told Gabe to tell C.J. to come in the kitchen. It went like this. What can I help you with, Agent Blackman? Sir, I need to speak to you about something personal. Okay. Can you speak while I cook? Yes, sir. Gabe, make yourself scarce, please. That's okay. He can hear, CJ said quickly. Gabe shrugged and sat down at the kitchen table, eager to hear, because he was totally interested in what he hoped was about to be said. Go on, Agent, his father said. Well, sir, I wanted to talk to you about your daughter. I have 6 daughters. Oh, yes, sir. I'd like to talk to you about Violet. His dad only sighed, but remained silent as he broke eggs into a bowl to scramble. He did nod his head. Violet and I, well, what I mean is, your daughter, is a very special girl. His dad had stopped cooking for a moment and looked sternly at the agent. It will probably go better for you if you man up and come out with it. CJ lowered his head in defeat and nodded. Yes, sir. Agent Tanner, I think I'm in love with Violet. I've been seeing her behind your back, and I know I'm breaking the rules, and I have no excuse for it, except when I'm not with her, I feel like, I don't even know what to call it. Empty, I guess. I know it sounds weak, but I'm totally blown away. So I'm here to do two things: to beg to be able to openly date Violet and beg for my job. Because if things go the way I hope, I'll need to support her, and I can't support her if I don't have my job. His dad arranged the eggs and some toast on a plate as if CJ had just told him the weather is nice today. His dad turned. Hold that thought. He grabbed a fork and a glass of OJ and went upstairs. CJ looked over at Gabe with a smile. How am I doing? I think so far so good. He doesn't look like he's going to blow, but then again, he usually doesn't. Doesn't blow? No, he doesn't look like it. There's no warning. Great. So why'd you want me to stay? Gabe asked. Well, we've all heard the stories of how Director Lee jumped on Jensen when he and Kimmy were getting together. Thought you might be a buffer. Gabe's dad came back into the kitchen. Jensen was caught leaning Kimmy back over the desk and having at it. Not a smart move. But you, using my son as a buffer, pretty smart. Gabe smiled. Have a seat, his father ordered. CJ sat down at the table. So, you know you've blatantly broken my number one rule. My daughters are off limits. Yes, sir. Was it worth it? Well, it will be if I end up marrying Violet. Good answer, but let's look at another scenario. I fire you, and all the years you've put into being an Ameritech agent, all the hard work, all the hopes and dreams will be for nothing. And then, as you mentioned earlier, then how would you support my daughter? Yes, sir. I know I'm walking on thin ice. I know I could lose everything. But Violet, she's special. She's worth the risk, sir. Well, let's look at another scenario. You realize you're attracted to my daughter. You think you absolutely must do something about this attraction. So you come to me, man to man, and ask if I could bend the rules for you and allow you to date Violet. Then you two fall in love, and it would have been something her mother and I saw coming from afar off instead of like this. CJ was silent. You don't have anything to say about that? I do, sir, but I don't really want to say it. Gabe's brows rose this time. Well, I suggest you rethink that. The thin ice you were walking on is breaking. Well, what happens if the ice breaks, sir, if you don't mind my asking? I'm just examining all my options. Well, if the ice breaks, you have no job and no Violet, so talk. He swallowed hard and nodded his head. I wanted to do just what you said. Come to you and ask permission to date Violet, but he stopped. His dad simply waited. Gabe had always marveled at the power of silence when used by his father. CJ shifted uncomfortably. But Violet begged me not to do it. His dad's eyes closed for a brief second. Did she say why she didn't want you to come to me? Not really. She seemed afraid. She seemed panicked whenever I tried to speak to her about it. Gabe thought his heart would break at the look of hurt in his father's eyes. Right then, there was a thumping on the stairs, and Rose and Violet came into the kitchen, and Violet stopped and looked from face to face, her own going pale. What's going on? She asked softly, her eyes already filling. CJ rose to his feet. I'm sorry, Violet. I had to speak with your father. I couldn't stand it any longer. Violet looked at her father, her eyes blinking back tears. Daddy, I'm sorry. It was all my fault. Please don't be mad at CJ, and please don't fire him. Come on, Gabe, Rose said. Let's give them some privacy. No, Violet and CJ said at the same time. His dad sighed. Tell me, Violet, how is it all your fault? I was being selfish. I didn't want him to tell you because I didn't want you to be disappointed in me for having feelings for someone who works for you and for having feelings for someone I just met because, you know, what happened in New York. But when I met CJ, it was like, I don't know, love at first sight. Gosh, I know how silly that sounds. That was before I found out that CJ felt the same way about me, and by then I didn't know how to tell you without getting CJ fired. I didn't want to be responsible for hurting the man I was falling in love with. His dad looked at CJ. You were supposed to be protecting her. Yes, sir, I know that, and I did. And you don't think you were distracted? Dad, didn't you fall in love with Mom when you were supposed to be protecting her? Violet asked. Oh, you have your facts a little mixed up. Your mother was taking care of me after my accident. Yes, it's not exactly the same, but still, you knew being there was putting her in danger and knew there would come a time when you would have to protect not only her, but us girls too, right? Yes. And did loving her make you distracted or make you super vigilant? His father sat there silent for several moments and he nodded. Good argument, Violet. So, what are you going to do? Violet asked her father. Well, let's see now. Agent Blackman has mentioned that things are getting pretty serious. He did? Yes, he did. And he actually said that the way things are going, he's going to need his job so that he can support you. Violet's mouth fell open. CJ shook his head and drew a deep breath. So, to the marriage thing, for now, I'm going to have to say no. For now, he added again. Push that out of your minds, way out of your minds. I will, however, give him permission to date you, and we'll just see where this goes from here. I will also allow him to keep his job. The fact that he is one of the best helps that, but that puts me in a bit of a situation as far as setting an example for the other agents. They'll see that there was no consequence for breaking my rule. Well, maybe you should just get rid of that rule, Violet offered. Nope. My daughters are off limits to the agents. If they want an exception considered, they'll need to be a man and come convince me otherwise. If they aren't brave enough to do that, they aren't agent material. Agent Blackman was very close to losing his job because I was becoming impatient. But his job is safe for the time being. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Daddy. I'll even commend him for finally standing up to you and coming to me man to man like he knew he should have done in the first place. CJ heaved a sigh of relief. But there has to be consequences, Agent Blackman. So starting tomorrow, you will spend the next 2 weeks in the custodial sanitation department. CJ nodded. Yes, sir. And do the job well, like your life depends on it, because, well, it does. Any job worth doing is worth doing well. Yes, sir, absolutely. Thank you. And Violet, it's unsettling to me that you seem to be afraid of coming to me about something, about anything. Violet looked down. Have I ever yelled at you? No, sir. Have I ever hit you? No, sir. Do you know that I love you? Yes, sir, and I love you too, Daddy. Then please, don't be afraid to come to me about anything at any time. I'm not afraid of you, Daddy. I just don't want to displease you. I don't want to disappoint you. She looked up, and I realized that's exactly what I did by not coming to you. He smiled. Well, we'll just let this go and start fresh. She nodded. Well, just one more thing, he said. You falling in love with someone would never disappoint me, even if it's innocently misplaced, like up in New York, as long as you're keeping it clean. He looked at CJ. Oh, yes, sir, absolutely. I fell in love, but I'm not stupid. Gabe felt much better about leaving, knowing that everything was out in the open and settled. And now he's sitting here at dinner with all these amazing people and will be leaving in the morning. His eyes moistened. Gabe? He shook his head to snap himself out of his reverie. Yes, sir? You okay? He nodded. Yeah, just trying to remember every second with the best family in the world. Aw, little bro, you getting mushy on us? Rose said. Gabe cleared his throat. Gabe cleared his throat. I guess so. Peyton talked to me before he left. He said life was changing and it seemed kind of sad. And in an effort to try to help him, I told him to try to embrace the moment wherever he was, and that to be men, we have to adjust and pivot and roll with the punches or something like that. But, I get what he was talking about. Life is changing. I mean, it's not like I want to stay and go back to high school and play ball all my life. He stopped and grinned, or maybe I do. Everyone chuckled. But really, I remember when Heather left for college. I mean, she really never came back, except for short visits. And then the very next year, Rose and Violet graduated and left for college. And even though I know the circumstances for them coming home weren't good, still I was really happy when they came home and decided to go to Gordon and live here. And the same for Daisy and Lily. I was so happy that they were going to stick around. And then there's Iris. He turned and touched her little turned up nose. Everyone's favorite. The next time I see her, she'll be 3. So, sweetie, what are you saying? Lizzie said. You just want to stay frozen in this moment? I mean, yes, but no, of course not. I want to go and make something of myself, and I miss Taylor, and I want to see her. I guess I'm just trying to take this all in. You're going to make new memories, my sweet boy. I'm so proud of you. Even with what you're saying, those are the words of a mature young man who understands the preciousness of family and of life. I agree with your mother, Keegan said. Couldn't have said it better myself. And what you all just said is going on his social media, 'cause I have it all recorded, Rose said as she put her phone down. Gabe rolled his eyes. What? You told me to record our dinner together, didn't you? Not to go on my site. Well, I'll edit it. Don't worry. I'll only keep in the parts that don't make you look like a complete idiot. Gee, thanks, Rosie. You're welcome, Gabriel Tanner. New scene. That night, before bed and the next morning too, there were lots of hugs and kisses and admonitions for safety and smartness. That morning, Gabe fueled up with his mom's fluffy buttermilk pancakes drenched in maple syrup, link sausages, and washed it down with ice-cold raw milk. He was sure going to miss the country air and country food. They headed toward the airport. Once they were in the air, Keegan handed Gabe a small box. What's this? Gabe asked. It's from Jason, or I guess I need to get used to saying Director Lee. It's a small step toward your goal. He looked inside the box, and there were 2 cards. Gabe eyed them carefully, reading everything on them, even the small print. One was an Ameritech agent ID, showing he was officially employed as an Ameritech agent/security officer. Gabe smiled. Wow, cool. And there will be a different one once you complete basic training, but this is a good start. Think of it as a learner's permit. He then looked at the other one. It was a weapons permit for the state of California. So I'm only 18. How did Director Lee, get this? Well, it's like the same thing when you're a young man joins the military at 18. He has to be able to use his weapon, right? The same goes for you. You have to be able to train with your weapon. So as an agent, you have the right to carry your sidearm, and remember, as an agent, you are always on duty. You may not open carry, though, until you're 21, though I don't recommend it ever. Gabe knew that was because open carry was like a beacon, especially in California. Gabe and his dad talked almost the whole flight, mostly about his training. Gabe had an advantage there and had been pre-training all summer, working hard, getting stronger, getting faster, shooting while running, while backing up, reloading, swimming miles, holding his breath, cross-training, climbing, knife fighting, everything they could do to help him get ready. Part of why Keegan was coming to LA was not only the revamping of Ameritech, but the revamping of the Jets training. They wanted to make it harder than ever. They wanted to make it so hard, especially on the first day of training, that most guys would immediately drop out. That would make Jets the real elite, the cream of the crop. The original Jason's elite would be a part of this new training and therefore needed to test themselves. And that included Keegan, who at 49 was much older than the other originals. It was Friday morning. They would stay with the Kinos over the weekend. It was Friday morning. They would stay with the Kenos over the weekend, then Gabe would report the next week. So he was looking forward to spending the weekend with Taylor. There was a big Ameritech meeting scheduled for early Saturday morning around the Keno's giant dining room table, which looked more like a boardroom table. Gabe was not invited to that meeting, which was fine with him. Instead, he and Taylor would be going to her volleyball practice at her school because she did indeed make the team. He was looking forward to watching her play. It was always a long trip from the ATL to LA, and he was glad when they finally pulled through the Keno's gate. As usual, Grandmaster Keno and Shelley came out to greet them and welcome them back. When Gabe bowed to Grandmaster Keno, he felt something strange, a knowing, a premonition, but he couldn't place it. It made him dizzy for a second or two. Eric reached out and took his hand. "You okay there, son?" Gabe swayed and put his hand on his head. "I think so." That was weird. Another vision? No, just an odd feeling. "You must be hungry," Shelley said. "Come on in, get settled, and come to the kitchen." Gabe hugged her. "Yes, ma'am." He pulled out his phone and glanced down when it buzzed. He looked up with a smile. "Taylor is on her way over." New scene. It's August 23rd, Friday evening, Keno Estate, Crystal Cove, California. Gabe and Taylor were going at it hard out back on the volleyball court. Gabe was slamming it down at her, and she was bumping it back, and he was giving her some instruction, and she was taking it well, mostly because he was saying pretty much the same type of things her coach always said. They stopped to drink some water. "So," Taylor said, a little breathless, "did you play volleyball in school?" "No, they don't have boys volleyball in our school, but some schools do." "Well, then how do you know so much about it?" He shrugged. "Well, when we came in from football practice, the girls would either be practicing or playing a tournament in the gym, and us guys would hang out and watch." "So you thought it was an interesting sport?" He grinned. Sure, yeah, it was interesting. But honestly, I mean, a bunch of athletic girls in those cute little black shorts. That's hot. And like, I am a guy." He shrugged like that would pretty much explain it, and it pretty much did. Taylor laughed. "Well, I appreciate your honesty anyway." He grabbed her hand and pulled her to him. "But it's that picture of your backside that I blew up and pinned to my bedroom wall." "You're kidding." "Yeah, I am. I don't have a picture of your backside on my bedroom wall. I rolled it up and brought it with me." Taylor punched him, and he instinctively blocked it. "Oh, you think you're good," she threatened. "I do." She threw another and another. It turned into an all-out battle. Taylor trying to take him down and Gabe trying to spar without hurting her. It was a challenge. The two agents guarding their perimeter were sorely tempted to turn and watch, but didn't dare. The battle went on for a good 5 minutes until Gabe wrestled her down into the sand and pinned her. She struggled to get out from under him. "Be still," he said, his breath coming hard. "Or what?" "Or I'll make you." She tried to knee him, and he shifted and blocked. "Wow, that was dirty. I warned you." He lowered his head and kissed her, and she immediately stopped struggling. Bree watched from the kitchen window with a smile. Ricky stood next to her, frowning. "I don't think I like what I'm seeing." "Well, she started it," Bree said. "I remember you and I wrestling around like that. We were a lot older by about 10 years. She turned and put her arms around his neck. "Wouldn't it be fun to go back to that time and do it all over again?" He smiled. "Indeed it would. But we don't have to go back in time. We just need to get home." She giggled. "I'm going to hold you to that. You do that." "Okay, then. We're leaving right after Mom's special dinner. I'm looking forward to it." New scene. It's August 24th, Saturday morning, Keno Estate, Crystal Cove, California. Jason looked around the table at the faces of the men who'd helped to make Ameritech a successful international agency, one that was making huge strides. Sitting to his right, first and foremost, Grandmaster Keno, who'd taught Jason most everything he knew since he was a little kid. He'd put Jason on the path. Next to him, Justin Lee, Jason's older brother and Eric's best friend, who'd brought Jason along on that fateful first meeting with Eric, and now kept Ameritech legal with his team of attorneys working around the clock. Also at the table was Ricky Keno, on board and always ready to use his celebrity to help a cause, and who'd been deputized a few times for special missions. And there was Mark Adams, Justin's protege, and the guy who would soon take over for Justin. Joey Adams, a jet, the meanest badass there is, and the one who loves Ameritech with his whole heart and sees the potential of the equalizing abilities of the agency. He will one day run it. Others present at the meeting were sniper sharpshooter Jeff Davis, who was one of his early agents, Cameron Wallace, who was the first elite, and Jason's son-in-law, Jensen Deal, who was a sharpshooting super hacker computer expert. They were all jets and all crucial to the agency. There were ex-Special Forces Keegan Tanner, who was one. There was ex-Special Forces Keegan Tanner, who was one Jason had recruited personally, seducing him away from the FBI. Jason depended on his expertise on many levels. And then there was Aussie, John Sweet, a jet, who may one day run the field offices down under. Also present, Ron Willard, Leonard Dixon, and Franz Close, and Kang Minjum, who represented the agency in Britain, Canada, Germany, and South Korea, respectively. Sweden's director was unable to make the meeting, but would be joining them via internet. The women present, Asia Parker, Tina Gray, Jackie Bonner, and Tasha Carrington, were also an integral part of the agency. The first three running accounting, human resources, and public relations, and the last one, Jason's personal assistant. They were not only experts in their respective fields, but they were well-trained martial artists and marksmen and had participated in several ops. 4 women and 14 men here, but they weren't the only ones who were major contributors. Some of the best had been left as a skeleton crew to run things during the next several days, while this revamping of Ameritech took place. Jason smiled. Thank you for that prayer, Ricky. Though it pains me to say so, it was surprisingly just as beautiful as your father's prayers. The group laughed. Jason and Ricky were known to constantly bait each other. Oh, you're welcome, Jason. I figure with you running this meeting, we need all the help we can get. Jason nodded. You speak the truth. And I'd also like to take the time to thank Shelley and Eric for their hospitality and Shelley and Angel for that delicious breakfast. You're welcome, Angel called from the kitchen as she and Shelley worked on cleaning up. Jason went on. Tasha has placed in front of each of you, a packet of information. I will expect all of you to read it carefully and commit it to memory, which should be no problem by the time we get through it over this coming week. If you'll open your manuals to page 7, we're going to go over the new geological locations and service areas. He stopped, eyebrows raised, when a phone buzzed. Eric turned his phone over to see who it was and looked up. Sorry, it's the gate. I got to take it. He started to stand and walk away. Jason nodded. Stay. We'll wait. Eric hit speaker. This is Eric. I'm sorry to interrupt you, sir, but we have a bit of a situation. There's a woman here at the gate who says it's imperative that she speak to you. She's crying and pretty much begging to see you. She says it's a matter of life and death. Describe her, please. Latino, long dark hair, maybe in her 30s. Eric glanced up at Jason. Send her up. Yes, sir. Oh, and she says you'll pay for her Uber. She's correct. He hit end. Jason, can it be so easy that the woman we've been searching for simply shows up? We'll know soon, Jason said. Mark stood. I'll go pay the driver. Jason nodded. Jeff, go with him. And Asia, pat her down. They both rose to do his bidding. Shall we do this in your office, Eric, or you want to handle things here? Eric looked around. Well, the people at this table might end up being part of what's going down, and it might be a good exercise to see how Ameritech's upper levels swing into action and work together. Let's do it here so we don't have to go through the trouble of repeating everything she says. Jason nodded and quickly explained the situation to those who hadn't already been privy. Be aware. See if you can pick up things that we might miss. They moved around, making a place for the woman near Eric. Some of the agents stood and casually leaned against the wall to make the meeting seem less formal. They all looked the woman over as Asia escorted her in and asked her to sit in the designated chair. She seemed hesitant, nervous, even frightened. It's okay, Eric assured her. We were having a meeting, but all of these people are here to help. She was Latino, pretty, had long, thick black hair back in a low ponytail. Her body was fit. She wore jeans and a red t-shirt and that had a logo on it in black and yellow that read, Carlita's Early Learning and Daycare. She turned toward Eric immediately. Oh, Senor Gino, gracias, gracias. Eric smiled kindly and nodded. De nada. Tu habla inglés? Sí, yes. She was breathing hard. Sorry. When I'm very upset, I go back to Spanish. I understand. What's your name? Luciana Ramirez. She wiped her tears with her hand, and Shelley appeared with a box of tissues, placed them in front of the woman, and retreated back into the kitchen. Luciana, how can I help you? Senor Gino, there is a terrible thing happening, and it could even happen today. You have to stop them, please. Are you in danger? Yes, but it's not me. I need you to help. It's the children. Someone is going to hurt your children? She started crying again, harder, sobbing almost uncontrollably. Luciana, Eric said softly, taking her hand, if you want me to help, you're going to have to calm down and tell me everything, okay? She grabbed a few tissues and nodded her head. See, yes. Yes, I'm sorry. Your children, where are they and what danger are they in? She shook her head. Not my children. Oh, the children at your daycare? Yes, but it's not really a daycare. That's a cover. Who are these children? Are they being trafficked? She drew a deep breath. No, Senor Kino. They are your children. Eric glanced up at Ricky, his heart starting to speed up. Who? Jeffy? Bree? Who? No, these are babies. Oh my goodness, those precious babies, she blubbered. Luciana, Eric said sternly now, calm yourself and explain. She sniffed. Before, when that Dr. Black took you and your wife, he took your samples, your wife's eggs and your seed, and he made babies, your babies. He used surrogates. Eric was now breathing hard, and Ricky put his hand on his shoulder to calm him. How many babies did he make? Jason asked. 7. I think it was 7. 2 of them died right away, within a few months of their birth. I took care of the 5 that were left, me and 2 other women. We take shifts. They are so precious, so precious. I love them so much. But we found out a few months ago that one of the little girls was deaf and she burst into tears again, and it took her a moment to calm down enough to speak. She sniffed. They said they didn't want imperfections, and that horrible man, he came and he took her and he killed her. He didn't think I saw, but I did. He put his hand over her nose and mouth and he killed her. And she struggled so hard. Sweet, sweet Maria. There was a whimper in the kitchen, and Eric looked up to see Angel try to catch his wife. Mark quickly ran in the kitchen, picked up his mother, and carried her to the living room and laid her on the sofa. Eric looked back at Luciana. What man? Do you know his name? She nodded. Mr. Payne. I don't know if it's his first name or last name. He says Payne is all we need to know, because that's what we'll feel if we tell anyone that we are taking care of a billionaire's children, because people want to kidnap them and hold them for ransom. Eric now spoke through his own tears. How old are my children? They are 2. All of them? See, all born in May. You have to save them. He's going to kill them all. How do you know this? After he killed my precious Maria, I started sneaking around. I got into his office. I found files on you and your wife and your daughter and all the surrogates and the babies. And that's when I found out they were your children. When we were hired to take care of the children, we were told that they were septuplets and that they had grown so large their mother had died in childbirth. We were told their father was in jail but was very rich and will pay us handsomely for their care. When the first 2 died, we thought it was a natural death, but now I'm not so sure. Once we found out the truth, we were so scared, and that's when I tried to call you, but I ran out of time, and I overheard him talking to the lady. I don't know her name, but he talks to her a lot. How do you know he's talking to a woman? He talks to her on speaker. I can hear the whole conversation if I sit on the stairs, which I started doing during nap time to find out more information. And the woman said that your wife's eggs are old and they were going to get new eggs and this time use seed that comes from Dr. Black. He said if they get new eggs, then there is no need to keep these children because none of them has shown any signs of being special. I know he was talking about killing the babies like he did Maria. Luciana, Jason said, where are they being kept? They are at 1027 Barina Drive in Santa Clarita. It says Carlita's Daycare on the sign out front. Joey, get me recon on that location stat, Jason ordered. Joey immediately got on his phone and walked away from the table. Where do they intend to get more eggs? Eric asked. She looked up. From your granddaughter. Senior, you have to get them out of there. If I don't show up for work, they're going to know I told someone. They will move them or maybe even kill them right away, though I don't think they'll do that until they have your granddaughter in their hands, but I think that will happen very soon. Ricky stepped away and called the agents who were currently with Taylor and Gabe. Jason took over. Tell me everything else you know. The setup inside the daycare, where they sleep, where they play, where they eat, who was with them, how much security is there inside and out, how often is Payne there. Mr. Payne lives there, on the top floor. It's like a large house on a corner lot. If you drive down the side street, there is a well-to-do neighborhood. There are always guards at the front door and the back door. Those are the only doors in and out of the house. What about outside? Is there any security outside? Jason asked. I've never seen any guards outside. The children eat and have lessons on the main level, and the kitchen is in the back of the house, and the back door is in the kitchen, and just inside the front door is a big room with some sofas and chairs. Sometimes I sit there and read stories to the babies. She dabbed at her eyes. Little Maria didn't ever seem to be interested except when I showed the pictures. And I told Mr. Payne she needed to see a doctor and that I think she can't hear. So he had the doctor come to the house and run tests on her, and he said she was deaf. And Payne killed her, and it was my fault. She burst into tears again. Please tell me you'll get them out of there. Yes, we'll get them, Eric said softly, his heart breaking. And my friends, Camilla and Lonnie, they are so afraid. Mr. Payne will kill them too, and they will kill me when they find out I came to you. We'll get your friends too. And can you please get me a ride back to the daycare? I'm not sure that you should go back, Eric said. Oh, no, I must. I have to. If I don't, the children could be in worse danger. I have to show up on time. Please. If I show up, it will give you a little more time to make your plans, and I can assure the safety of the children. And I can assure the safety of the children. If you tell me when you will come, I will make sure that they are all downstairs in the basement. That's where they sleep and where they play so that their noise doesn't bother Mr. Payne. I can keep them safe down there until you come. Jason? Eric asked. He nodded. I'm going to need to work with the police on this one, and we'll escort Luciana back to the house as if we were her Uber driver. Do the children take a nap? Yes, sir. Every day at 2:30 until 4, downstairs, in their beds. Can you keep them all together in one room today for their naps, or will that draw attention? Oh, yes, I can do it. All their beds are in this big room at the end of the hall. Can you draw me a diagram of the floor plan? Jason asked. She sniffed. Yes. Pen and paper, Tasha. Keegan, organize Overwatch, please, Jason ordered. In a neighborhood, it may be difficult to find higher ground, Keegan responded. I don't care if they have to climb a tree, find it. Roger that. Rick, did you reach Agent Trout? Yes, Gabe and Taylor are at volleyball practice at the high school gym. Agent Ward has the door, Agent Trout is recon, and Gabe is also carrying. I told them to come straight back as soon as practice is over. No, have the agents bring them to my home. I'll run the operation from there. I need my equipment. I'm going there in just a few minutes. I'll feel better if they're near me. Ricky nodded and walked away again to call in the change. Joey, how long? Coming in right now. There was a chopper in the air and I diverted him. Joey nodded at Jensen. Jensen, I'm having the helo send you current surveillance. What do you see? Jensen clicked some keys on his laptop. I have Heat and Xavier signatures for, he paused, 7. On the main level, 1 in a room to the far left, 2 near the front entrance, 2 near the back. Down 1 level, there are 2 more, and then there are 4 much smaller signatures, I assume, are the children. That's 1 extra, Jason said. Luciana, do you know why there would be more than 1 downstairs with the children? She started to cry again. No, unless the doctor came again or unless Lonnie stayed after her shift. If the doctor came, that could mean one of the babies is sick. Eric took Luciana's hand. We're going to go get the children. Soon? Today. Jason will let you know what time. He stood. Excuse me, though. I have to see to my wife. Eric went immediately to the living room. Shelley was now sitting up, tears streaming down her face. Mark had his arm around her, and Eric sat down next to her, and she threw herself against him. He held her tight and let her cry it out. He understood, because he felt like doing the same. Thing. A child, his child, he didn't know existed, had been brutally murdered. Possibly 2 others. His gut wrenched with the pain. Shelley looked up into his face, and he schooled his features, and she needed to see strength and be reassured. We'll get them out, Shelley. We'll get through this. Trust me. Trust God. I need you to be strong, not for me, but for these little ones. Can you do that? She sniffed and raised her head. Yes, Eric, I can do it. That's my girl. Before Jason left for his home, Joey and Keegan on the phone with the Santa Clarita Police Department organized teams to plan the storming of the daycare center and the rescue of the children. Jason's contacts with the FBI were also brought in on the case. Luciana was given a vest to wear under her shirt, and her ride back to the Carlitos daycare center arranged. The rescue was planned to take place at approximately 3 p.m., 1 hour after Luciana would arrive at the daycare. Lastly, Jason looked at Eric. I don't suppose I could get you to stay here and wait for us to return. Eric shook his head. That's a ridiculous question. I won't interfere or get in your way. I'll go straight downstairs to the children when you give me the okay. Ricky will be with me, and Jason, you have to know the law is not going to just let me take those children home without having them examined at a hospital and a ruling in court. It could be some time before I'm able to get to them if I don't go with you. And I need to get to them first so that I can do this right with as little trauma to their minds as possible. Well, you're correct about the courts. They would normally be put into foster care until the courts go through all the red tape. But I've just spoken to Justin, and he is arranging to have you and Shelley be the foster care providers. So, as an alternative, I don't suppose I could get you to wait at the hospital until they arrive. Eric shook his head. Another silly question. Imagine for a minute that these are your and Angel's children. You think about it. Jason sighed and nodded. Okay, but you wait for my clearance. Yes, sir. Okay, but you wait for my clearance. Yes, sir, Eric said sarcastically. Well, I mean, don't disrespect, Eric. It's my love for you that makes me so protective. Understood. And by the way, that was great foresight arranging the foster situation. Well done on that. Yep, I get that ear of corn every once in a while. New scene. It's still Saturday morning. Brookside High School, Newport Beach, California. Gabe watched Taylor with so much pride he was beginning to understand how a father felt when watching his kid play sports. Taylor was a natural athlete, quick, strong, fast thinker, and she was very coachable. All the drills the coach was putting the team through, she excelled at. She was short compared to most of the girls, but extremely nimble. Her vertical jump was superhuman. Her serve was powerful. She wouldn't be a hitter, but would be a libero. At least that's how he'd do it if he were coaching. Oh my gosh, he thought. If I were coaching. I sound like my father. Her long hair was back in a high ponytail, and she wore an old faded Keno Challenge t-shirt and some of those tight black shorts Gabe had talked about. Her knee pads were black, her shoes white with black trim. She was a thing of beauty, a work of art. He blew out a deep breath. His phone buzzed. Hey, Dad, how's the big meeting? It didn't happen. There's some stuff going down. It's too much to tell over the phone. The agents are going to take you and Taylor to Jason's house as soon as practice is over. Stay there until further notice. Yes, sir. Sounds big. It is. Stay awake and aware at all times. See you tonight. Okay, and, Dad, be careful. Copy that. Gabe looked at the time. Practice had just started and was supposed to go a couple of hours. He looked at Agent Ward, who stood at ready by the gym door, watching everyone. Agent Trout was not currently visible, but Gabe was sure he was nearby. He focused back on Taylor. It was going to be a long day. He decided to pass the time by making a video to post. He held his phone up. Hey, everyone. So today I'm here at a high school gym watching my girlfriend practice volleyball, he began. He spoke for about 10 minutes. He talked a little about the next phase of his life without giving out too much information. Satisfied that it was good enough content, he ended the video and sent it to the web girl who would edit and post it. Near the end of practice, the team ended up dividing into 2 teams and playing a scrimmage game. And Gabe had fun cheering for Taylor. He was so proud of her and happy for her, and she seemed happy too, if the big smile on her face said anything. The game ended and the team stood in a circle and listened to the coach talk and correct and tell them to not miss the next practice, which would be Monday after school. As soon as he dismissed the team, almost all of them came toward Gabe. His eyebrows rose as he stood with a smile on his face. They all asked me to introduce you to them, Taylor explained. So, everyone, this is Gabe Tanner. Gabe, meet the team. That's Lola, and that's Lauren, and that's Bianca. She went on to name 10 more girls. Gabe smiled and shook hands with each of them and offered a warm hello. A few of them asked for his autograph on their personal volleyball. Several asked for selfies. Well, I just need to go get my bag out of the locker room, Taylor said. Agent Ward stepped forward. Ask one of your friends to get it for you. I don't want you out of my sight. Lauren volunteered and hurried away. What's going on? Taylor asked. We have a situation, and we're to take you and Gabe to Jason's home immediately after practice. We've already dallied enough with all this autograph stuff. Is everyone okay? Taylor asked. My family, are they okay? Yes, but we need to go. Lauren came back with the bag and hugged Taylor, and they turned to leave. But outside the gym doors, Taylor shook her head. Well, I'm sorry, Agent Ward, but I can't hold it another second. She pointed next to the concession stand. There's a restroom right there. You can check it out first and then stand right outside the door, but I really got to go. Sighing, he nodded. He went in the restroom. It was empty. He came out. Okay, it's clear. She smiled sweetly. Thank you. Gabe and the 2 agents leaned against the wall to wait. A few seconds later, a woman pushing an elderly woman in a wheelchair came to the restroom, and she looked suspiciously at the men since they were standing right at the door. Excuse us, Agent Ward said, as Gabe and Agent Trout moved away, and Agent Ward held the door open for her. The woman pushing the chair thanked them profusely. Agent Ward had seen them in the gym during the practice and figured she was one of Taylor's teammates' grandmother. I guess I'll go too, Gabe said, and headed to the men's room. He turned with a smile. You want to check it out for me too? Are you locked and loaded? Trout asked. Gabe nodded. Well, then you go ahead, Gabe. I got faith in you, he jested. Inside the women's restroom, Taylor stood at the mirror, taking her hair down out of the ponytail and fluffing it up. Finally, she turned on the water and washed her hands. She smiled kindly at the old woman as she passed to get to the handicap facility, but the lady pushing her chair stopped right behind Taylor. Oh, my goodness, young lady, you have the most beautiful hair. She gathered Taylor's hair into her hands. Taylor frowned at her for being so forward, but thanked her for the compliment. The woman pushed Taylor's hair over to the front of her shoulder as she continued talking about how pretty she was. And then suddenly, there was a prick. What are you doing? Taylor asked as she started to struggle away from the woman, but she suddenly couldn't move, and her eyes caught the reflection of the needle as it was being pulled from her neck. Her breath was coming fast, and her world was going black. The old woman stood and quickly grabbed Taylor and shoved her down into the wheelchair. She then pulled the blue floral dress she wore over her head, revealing that she was a he. They worked quickly, the man holding up Taylor's limp body while the other woman, the real woman, pulled the dress over Taylor's head. She gathered her hair back up in a band and pushed a gray wig onto her head, threw a blanket over her lap, a shawl around her shoulders, covering part of her face, removing her shoes and replacing them with the old woman's clunky black shoes. The woman quickly turned and pushed the wheelchair out of the room. Once again, Agent Ward held the door for them, and once again she thanked him profusely. A minute later, Gabe came back out. She isn't out yet? The agents both put their hands up and shook their heads. Gabe frowned and knocked on the restroom door. Taylor, you okay? Almost done. Gabe frowned. Her voice sounded odd. He slowly opened the door. Taylor? There was no answer this time and no one in sight. He started opening stalls, and when he got to the last one, a man came at him. Gabe yelled and quickly put him down with a couple of forward elbows, and the agents came running in. She's not here, Gabe said, panic in his voice. Agent Trout looked up as it quickly dawned on him. The wheelchair. Gabe took off. As he ran down the corridor that led to the front of the gym, he could see through the glass doors, and what he saw was terrifying. A white van was parked out front. The side door was open, the empty wheelchair in front of it, and the woman who'd been pushing the wheelchair was jumping in. He slammed open the glass door and ran at the van. A man in the front passenger seat squeezed off a few rounds at him, but luckily missed. The van took off. Gabe didn't slow down. He cut across the long school drive, heading out at an angle across the parking lot, hurdling curbs and hedges at full speed to the drive that led out of the parking area. The van was going to have to turn left and come right at him, which it was getting ready to do. He pulled his Glock as the van turned and sped toward him. 2 quick shots and both front tires blew, but the van didn't stop, and Gabe had no choice. He fired 5 times at the driver's side windshield, and the van slowed and rolled to a stop. The passenger pointed his gun out the window and fired several times. Gabe was hit in the upper left thigh, but this time he remained on his feet and kept squeezing the trigger. He walked toward the van and fired 6 more times, and the guy finally stopped firing and slumped over. But Gabe had been hit again in the upper left chest, and he slowed. He forced himself to stay on his feet, and he stumbled to the side of the van and jerked it open. A woman leapt out at him and immediately drove her knife into his side. He fell and landed on his back on the street, one hand around her wrist to keep her from moving the knife, and the other hand at her throat, squeezing as hard as he could. Thankfully, Agent Trout finally made it there and jerked the woman off Gabe and knocked her out with one solid punch. Trout then jumped into the van to assess Taylor's condition. Gabe pulled the knife from his side and tossed it onto the street. He tried to get up and get to Taylor. Trout jumped back out of the van. Stay down, Gabe. She's okay. She's sedated, but she's breathing. He took off his shirt and pressed it against Gabe's chest wound. Agent Ward arrived with the man from the restroom in the abandoned wheelchair, his wrists cuffed. ETA of medical's 5 minutes. Hold on, Gabe, Ward said. Trout threw him his cuffs. Cuff her and give me your shirt. He took the offered shirt and pressed it with his other hand against Gabe's side. He was extremely relieved when he heard sirens in the distance. He looked at Gabe's face. Hey, buddy, open your eyes and look at me. Gabe did as ordered. You hang in there now. You got it? Yes, sir, Gabe mumbled. You gotta hold on. Taylor will be very upset to wake up and find out you didn't make it, so you freaking hold on. Gabe drew a ragged breath. It hurts pretty bad. You're tough. You can take it, right? Yes, sir, he said, breathing in gasps. Gabe, Ward said as he looked down at him, trying to distract him from the pain. That was some pretty good shooting there, buddy. You saved Taylor. She could be long gone by now. Gabe closed his eyes, sighing in relief and gratitude that she was okay. They all looked up as 3 Newport Beach police cars came screeching up, and right behind them, 2 ambulances. Ward and Trout moved out of the way as the paramedics took over. Which one is Agent Trout? An officer asked. Agent Ward had called Jason, quickly explained the situation, and Jason had then relayed the information to the police himself. He briefed them on the ongoing investigation of Taylor's attempted kidnapping and told them they could verify everything with the FBI. Ameritech's growing reputation and Jason's rapport with law enforcement always made these types of situations much easier, and today was no exception. The officer, unable currently to get Gabe's statement, walked around with Agent Trout, being the lead agent, who pointed out what he saw happening as he ran toward the van. "And how did the young man get here so much faster than you?" the officer asked. Trout smiled. "Well, the answer was in your question. Young man, and faster. This kid is freaking fast. And apparently a good shot. Oh, not a good shot. A real sharpshooter, sniper quality. Sounds like he's a prodigy." Trout nodded. "He is." The officer nodded but frowned as he looked over the two dead men, both slumped over inside the van. Gabe's Glock lay on the street along with the knife he'd pulled from his side. Both would be gathered into evidence. Detectives arrived, and while the police processed the scene, Trout went to check on Gabe's condition, which was critical but stable. They would be airlifting him to Redwood Hills in L.A. Ward checked on Taylor's condition, which was stable. She was already starting to stir a little bit, which was a good sign. She would also be taken to Redwood Hills by special request. Trout made the call to Jason to give a status report. "It's still Saturday, Keno Estate, Crystal Cove, California." New scene, "It's still Saturday, Keno Estate, Crystal Cove, California." Keegan glanced at his phone before he answered. "Yes, sir," Keegan answered. "Is Ricky nearby?" "Yep, he's right here." "Well, put me on speaker. This information is for the two of you." Keegan motioned to Ricky. "Jason wants to speak to us together." Ricky came immediately, a bad feeling in his gut. If he were to be honest, he'd had a bad feeling since he woke up this morning. Jason explained what took place. Taylor was fine. Gabe had been shot twice and stabbed and was in critical condition, and Keegan felt like he would be sick. "Keegan, you're dismissed. I'm sending you a car to take you to Redwood." "Thank you. Jeff and Franz are on Overwatch." "Got it. Hey, Gabe is stable. That's a good thing. Prayers going up." Keegan sighed. "Again, thank you." "Ricky, what is your plan?" He sighed. "I feel like I need to stay with Dad. I'll have Bree get to the hospital for Taylor." "I'll go with her," Shelley said from across the room, "and I'll get Jeffy there too, for Gabe." "Keep me informed," Jason said before he hung up. Ricky grabbed Keegan by the shoulder. "Keegan, your son is a hero. He saved my daughter from, well, who knows what. He probably saved her life, and he gave his all to do it, and I will be eternally grateful to him, and I'll tell him that myself when I get to the hospital this evening, because I know he's going to be fine." "Thanks, Rick," Keegan said with a slight nod. "I look forward to that happening." He sighed. I need to call my wife." And that is the end of chapter 33.